I want to talk to you about calculating cash flow associated with working capital changes. Now, if you remember from the end of class on Friday, I talked about how working capital is essentially the combination of your current assets. In this case, I'm doing cash, inventory, and accounts receivable, and your current liabilities, which in this case would be just accounts payable. You could also include accruals like wages payable and notes payable. But let's assume this company doesn't have any of those things. So, what I want to demonstrate today is how to calculate how changes in working capital will impact the cash that flows through your firm. So, I've set up a few transactions. Let's say that today the company first just incorporated, and so the founder put $3,000 of his own money into the checking account. And at the moment, there's no inventory or accounts receivable or accounts payable because they haven't bought any inventory and they haven't sold any product yet. But in about a week, they decide to buy some inventory on credit, $1,000 worth. And what I want to do is just go through the impact that's going to have on each of these accounts. So the inventory would rise by $1,000 if we bought inventory on credit, and then the accounts payable would rise by $1,000. So I'm inputting those as positive values since they're rising by that amount. Nothing would happen to cash, nothing would happen to accounts receivable. Let's say a couple of weeks later, some of that $1,000 comes due and they pay $700 of the accounts payable. Well, that would decrease your accounts payable by $700 and it would decrease your cash by $700. So I'm subtracting that amount from the cash account and the accounts payable account. And while I'm not keeping a running total, we can see that accounts payable would be now only $300 because it was $1,000 before and we just paid off $700 of it. Cash would be down to $2,300. Let's say a few weeks after that, the other $300 of accounts payable comes due, so we pay it. So that would reduce accounts payable by $300 and reduce cash by $300. Finally, let's say we sell some product on credit. So that would increase my accounts receivable by $500 and decrease my inventory by $500. And then lastly, let's say that these credit sales of $500, $300 of that was paid. So I'll subtract $300 from my accounts receivable balance and add $300 to my cash balance. And now I want to track the ending balance of all four of these accounts. So I'm just going to sum. Oops, I don't want to sum the word cash. I want to sum from row 2 through row 7. So my cash started out at 300, ended at 2,300. So the change is going to be 3,000. I think I said it started at 300, but it started at 3,000, ended at 2,300. I've got this backwards. So the 2,300 minus the 3,000. Oh gosh. So apparently I make the same mistakes in my office that I do in front of the classroom. Okay, so my change, I ended with 300. I started with 3,000. And the change is a decrease of $700. I'm just going to copy this ending balance over to my other three accounts. Inventory is now at $500 because I had bought $1,000 worth and sold $500 worth. Accounts receivable is at $200 because I had sold $500 worth of good on credit, but I collected $300 of that. And then accounts payable has a balance of 0 It started at zero, but I borrowed $1,000 through trade credit and eventually paid that off, all of it off. So now it's just at zero. Um, Now I want to show you how we could determine this change amount, how much cash has decreased by just evaluating um, inventory, accounts receivable, and accounts payable. So I am going to set up, I'll call it a T account. It's actually probably easier to do this by hand, but I'll go ahead and try to do it in Excel. So just pretend this is a balance sheet. And I've got assets, current assets on the left, and current liabilities on the right. Just going to make that look a little bit better. So my current assets, I've got inventory of an ending balance of 500. And I'm not going to type the word inventory. I'm just going to put the balances there. And I've got accounts receivable, which is a current asset of 200. And on the right, I've got current liabilities of accounts payable, which at the moment has a balance of zero. Excuse me. And so that it doesn't actually have a balance of zero, I'm going to change this entry right here. I was making this up on the fly, and sometimes I mess up when I make things up at the spur of the moment. So what I'd rather do here is say, well, instead of paying 300 of the accounts payable, I just paid 200. And so let me change that to 200. So now I had bought $1,000 worth of inventory on credit, and I paid 700 of it. Then a few weeks later, paid 200 of it. That's only 900, and I originally owed 1,000, so I still owe $100 on my accounts receivable. This will show things a little bit better, and also I need to change this entry for cash because if I paid 200 in accounts payable, instead of 300, so my cash dropped by only 200 for that entry. Now things look a little better. What I'm going to do is sum my current assets except for cash. So that's inventory and accounts receivable. And I'm going to sum my current liabilities. In this case, it's just accounts payable. And I know it's kind of silly to sum that, but I'm just trying to give you an idea that if you had more than one accounts payable or more than one current liability, it would go here, and I would sum all of them. So now what I can do is look at my balance sheet, and I see that these two totals don't balance. And looking at that allows me to figure out what has happened to cash because, excuse me, because this needs to balance. So I know since this doesn't balance that cash has to have dropped by $600 to get this side to equal that side. So if I subtract $600 from the 700, now this total equals that total, and my balance sheet balances. That is also exactly how much cash changed over the course of the transactions that I've been looking at. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that rather than going through all of these um, actions or transactions separately and calculating what happened to cash, I can just look at my ending balances for accounts receivable and accounts payable and inventory and estimate the cash that will flow through the company because of those activities. So I can just take all current assets except for cash, and subtract all current liabilities, and that would tell me how much cash flowed through the company that particular cycle.